I'm just going to take a sip of water. And I'll leave time. I'm not going to read the whole time, so I'll leave some time for conversation or questions and answers. This next poem is called Erasure, and it's one of my own. I'm tired of being erased, as in rainbow sidewalk chalk after a long-awaited rain, as in girth of a sage bundle after overuse trying to ward off 1,000 bad spirits, as in I can remember his pants down before I could grant consent, but no one wants to hear about it, as in flower essences dissolving on my tongue, as in quick-written poem that may go nowhere, as in Texas won't teach my people's history, but no one wants to hear about it, as in you people make everything about race, as in I can speak eloquently so I couldn't be brown, as in the partial animal skull I found by the creek bed, as in iris twilight bruising from the back of a hand but straight to the heart, as in you can't pronounce my last name, so I've erased it myself, as in melancholy blue of dusk fading, as in my heart is not in this, as in am I worthy, as in my voice is getting quieter, as in can you even hear me now? I break bread alone. I write several short sentences about trauma, then the world drops dead. An orange-bellied swallow prances beside my cold legs, oblivious to human pain. She's making poems with the shape of her breath in the weather. She breaks a worm from the ground. I break a line. Thank you. So I tried to bring poetry that's not too graphic, but seeing that we're bringing Native American voices into the space, there's bound to be some remnants of violence that we're still dealing with today and grappling with. So I wanted to read two poems. One of them will come a little later, but this next one is called I Hear America Singing. I hear America singing, but I can only think of silence on Bloody Island, of the young girl survivor of Native genocide, survival via Thule. Small-town county refuses to change town names named after her family's murderers. If I owned an island, I'd call it Silver. Silver linings in isolation. Is it a sin for a brown girl to plan her own elegy, so many of her kind struck down daily without consent? Consent is an island America would never live on. My uterus is an island no one will touch, save for Republicans in offices that cost more than my life. Call me an animal. Call me by my true name, race war child. In Mexicans, I believe. I pledge allegiance to native land. Hope is a thing with feathered birds that aren't yet extinct. Dip me in lavender, pour me honey and mint tea in a paper cup, hope for a decent night's sleep. Thank you for the breath. Some of the work is heavy. My work, one thing that I really appreciate about Walt Whitman is the fact that he is a nature poet, and some of his work is so beautiful because it speaks to nature, and that's one thing that we have in common. And so I wanted to highlight some of the nature in my poetry, and this particular poem was inspired by Song of Myself by Walt Whitman. I wrote it, I think, a year or two ago, and so I went and found it for this reading. It's called The Roofs of Mouths for Nothing. So many uttering tongues. The mouths of anxiety lie awake at night. A mustard-colored stink net has a silent mouth. What is the grass? A child asks. Will we see years to come? All beg to inquire. The dying world is like an arrow through the body with no exit wound, stuck, corroded. The earth now asking, what is the grass anymore? Will I see years to come? It pains the days of the black pansy to know if human will continue to care for it, if the honey taste of right from wrong, the sweet buzz of sugar on the tongue will make us humans, virus or not, care. It's a critical blue when we can see the sky without a filter of aerosol and chemtrails. A cloth mask over the human mouth and inconvenience. Ask the two-legged bodies if they taste the dying of the lands, if the roofs of their fearful mouths are for nothing. Thank you. Thank you. Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. I'm kind of soft-spoken, so I'll try to speak louder. I need to use my projection voice as a poet. So that poem is loosely about climate change, and that's one topic that I sometimes have a hard time writing about. It's difficult to write about climate change as we're living in it, so that's one attempt to do that. Am I okay on time? No? Okay, thank you. I didn't bring my phone up, but I'll read a few more. So this next poem, I didn't write it inspired by Walt Whitman, but as I was putting poems together for tonight, I thought about leaves of grass, and this poem is about wild grasses in some sense. So, a poem is a landscape, is a soft place to fall. This thing comes as waves, unfailingly, in unison with florets of grass swaying on terra firma. Purple needlegrass, melica, wild rye, field blades snake-like from intermittent zephyrs. Feel this to feel alive. I believe I was born into grief, somehow always knowing death was narrowly on the other side. I once woke my mother, 8 years old, crying, mourning for her death, afraid my father would use the weapon under his pillow on any given day. Home was not a safe place to land in. Grass is a natural water collector. Even in summer, how it feels velvet, moist, an understated bed heaven for bare feet and consoling. California oat, Green's Heath sedge, native. So much in this life is a hardened surface. So much is unmoving, holds you still and stagnant from reaching well-being. I remember the darkest soil being the safest haven, the anura, bullfrog, earthworm, annelida. There was no fear in the earth's cradle. I deer dance around words for wild grasses because they are easier to say aloud than to say abuse, to say hurt, to say wounded. To say that in my mind I'm still playing alone on a backyard trellis, avoiding the inside of home, a domestic legacy of hitting and shouting and demeaning. My legacy, a soft poem. Thank you so much. I wanted to make sure I read one poem about murdered and missing Indigenous women. And I'm so sorry again, Linda, that I missed your beautiful presentation, but I'm very honored to have been paired with Linda tonight, and I know that the red dresses are here, which is incredible to see. Certainly a movement that we need to be more aware of and make sure that we don't forget about it. So this is a poem I wrote called A Bitter Wind. Girl, woman, two-spirit, a bitter wind whisks away bodies upon bodies. Where do they go? The remains of 215 children buried in an unmarked grave at Kamloops Indian Residential School. One appears to be a child who died as young as 3. Chief Casimir says the bodies found so far appeared to be buried in separate, unmarked burial sites that are, to our knowledge, also undocumented. 5,712 cases of missing American Indian and Alaska Native women and girls in 2016. 2,306 missing Native American women and girls in the U.S. in 2020. The U.S. Department of Justice only reports 228 cases in 2021. Nearly 60% of the cases are homicides. 31% involve girls 18 and younger. I remember me at 17, young brown girl walking alone, Highway 29, Pomo Reservation. A middle-aged man attempted to lure me into his dirty white pickup truck. I could have been one of the missing. Not one woman-identified Native is safe from this. This is no bitter wind, only sharp human action, acerbic, forthright, stealing souls in the night or shamelessly in the blinding daylight. I find their spirits in my thoughts. In burning sage and copal, I imagine their spirits lifting up in the smoke, settling into the corners of my safest haven. No red violence smeared across their faces, no last breaths taken, no fear to land in a place beyond found. Thank you. Thank you. And I came in right when Linda was explaining the red, and so I'm thankful for the library for displaying these dresses. Let's see. I'm thinking I might read 2 more poems. Is that okay for time? Okay. And then, does anyone have the time, by the way? Sorry. 6:50. Oh, okay. So we're okay. I think we go until 7:30. Okay. So I want to make sure there's some time for questions or answers or discussion. So I wanted to share a couple more of my nature poems. And then I wanted to end with a specific poem. So, to be still is to be animal. How the sun glimmers and glistens through valley oaks on a rustic hillside. How the warmth permeates amber honey skin and a tense body loosens. How the ground cover of fallen autumn leaves aches of a soothing vibrancy. How I breathe between these happenings. How yearning for more makes the muscles weak, turns the heart to a tiny blue egg, an oval shape, a crack on all sides as if someone took it and threw it into the night sky. How the brittle shell was adorned with cornflower and flaxen. How I came home to myself after the breaking, half human, half bird. How winter frost is arriving again. How a hunger remains. How the burrowing owl and the American robin observe, witnessing all of this. How they don't swallow time in the same way or long for difference. What if all of this was enough? Is anyone familiar with Lake County, by the way? A couple of people? A lot of people tend to know us from the wildfires, unfortunately. We've experienced about 7 consecutive years of wildfires, and about 60% of our county has burned, unfortunately. So witnessing how the nature and the landscape has changed over the last 5 years, I would say, has made me appreciate it more. And so a lot of my poetry naturally extends to nature. And nature has also kind of been my own support in grieving. I've had a lot of losses over the last few years, as we all have, unfortunately, through COVID. So that's another thing that I really thought about in preparing for this event and thinking about how my poetry might speak with Walt Whitman's poetry, despite all of the race-related concerns we might have with, or I might have personally, with some of his work. It all comes back down to nature, which is, regardless of what our ethnicity is or our skin color, it's really nice to be able to come back to nature, which doesn't discriminate to anyone. And so I find solace in a lot of special places in Lake County, whether they've been burned or not. I had to bring at least one sort of ocean poem since I'm reading here in Monterey. So this poem is one of my newest poems I've written in my MFA program, Only Temporary. We never come into the answers, do we? We don't even talk about the questions. What's next? Are we defining this? Am I getting off as much as you are? No. I longed for time away from home and headed towards mint ocean waves of Drake's Beach. I drove past a single church in the woods, St. Cecilia's, past wild California lilac of Olema, its toxicity vivid, followed a curvature of roads, their shape much like the outline of my hips when you trace them with your warm fingertips. Acres of wild yarrow, miles of mustard flowers grow pathways to the Pacific and to my version of church. I arrived. I sat on a pew of driftwood. I asked cracked sand dollars how long I can tolerate being only a temporary body. They didn't answer back. I returned home, stopping along the way to photograph oceanside flora, cow parsnip, blue blossom, common gorse. I just want to mean something to you, is what I daydream, saying out loud, but I don't bother to learn how.